she boasted about her tail. Until I showed mine and shocked, her Kale had always loved exploring the stars. From a young age, he would stare at the night sky, imagining planets filled with strange creatures, glowing forests and cities that shimmered like gemstones. Now, as a young human explorer, he had the chance to see those worlds for himself. The latest stop on his journey was the space station Aurora Nexus, a hub of trade, culture, and curiosity. Built in orbit around a lush, green planet, the station floated like a jewel among the stars, its lights twinkling against the dark canvas of space. Kale stepped off the small transport shuttle, his boots clicking softly on the metallic floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone and flowers, a mixture created by the station's artificial biospheres. Everywhere he looked, beings of different species moved through the corridors. Some had translucent skin that glowed faintly in the light. Others had multiple limbs or feathers that shimmered with iridescence. Kale felt a familiar thrill in his chest. This was exactly why he loved traveling, meeting species unlike anything he had imagined. Learning their ways, seeing the universe in new eyes, he wandered through the market area. Colorful stalls lining the walkways. Merchants shouted in dozens of languages, selling everything from exotic fruits that sang when touched to floating toys that obeyed commands from thought alone. Kale had a small backpack on his shoulder, carrying a few essentials, but mostly he wandered to observe. He had heard tales of a certain alien who was famous across the station for her tail, her long, shimmering tail that could twist and curl with incredible skill. Some said she could lift multiple objects at once, dance midair, and even use it to catch small creatures without hurting them. Kale rounded a corner and saw her immediately. She was standing atop a small platform, demonstrating her tail to a crowd. The creature Lyra was slender, with skin that shifted colors slightly as she moved. Her tail, long and lithe, sparkled in shades of blue and green. She twirled it in a way that seemed impossible, lifting a basket of fruits and then flipping it over to pour the contents neatly back into a crate. The crowd clapped and cheered, impressed by her skill. "I can carry 3 crates at once and still keep my balance," she boasted, letting her tail coil around the crates to lift them effortlessly. Her voice was musical, carrying easily over the market noise. "No one can do what I do. Not even a human." She laughed, her tone playful but full of pride. Kale felt a small smile tug at his lips. He had seen humans with small tails before, part of a rare experiment to improve balance and agility in space, but nothing like this. Lyra's tail was elegant, flashy, and clearly trained from a young age. He walked closer, curious. "That's impressive," he said quietly, hoping she would notice him. Lyra turned toward him, eyes bright and assessing. "Oh, a human dares to speak to me. Do you even have a tail worth mentioning?" Her words were teasing, but there was a spark of interest in them. Kale shrugged, pretending not to care. "I do. Kind of. But it's nothing like yours." He moved slightly, trying to keep his own small tail hidden under his jacket. It was barely noticeable, only a few inches long and flexible, and he had never really practiced using it for anything flashy. Lyra tilted her head, clearly intrigued. "Nothing like mine? Let's see it then." She raised her hands in a playful challenge, her tail curling in anticipation. The crowd around them sensed the budding rivalry and leaned closer, excited for the display. Kale hesitated. He had never been the type to show off. Humans were clever, yes, but flashy demonstrations had never been their style, and yet there was something about Lyra's confident energy that made him want to prove himself. He took a deep breath and stepped back, letting his jacket fall open slightly. The small tail behind him shifted, catching the light just enough to draw attention. The crowd murmured. It was small, certainly nothing like Lyra's magnificent tail, but Kale noticed their curiosity. He held his stance, letting the tail move subtly as he adjusted his balance. Leaning forward, stepping sideways, and performing a few careful movements. His tail, though small, moved with precision, reacting instantly to his shifts in weight. It was practical rather than showy. Kale smiled at the ease of its motions. Lyra blinked, her confidence faltering for the briefest moment. She had expected something simple, awkward, maybe even comical. Instead, Kale's tail moved with purpose. Not bad, she admitted, tilting her head. It's different, Kale grinned. Different can be useful. Stepped to the side, reaching for a small crate and lifting it using his tail as support. His balance perfect, despite the awkward weight. The crowd gasped softly, impressed by the ingenuity. It wasn't flashy, but it worked flawlessly. Lyra's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She had been so certain that no human could match even a fraction of her skill. And yet here he was, using a tail that looked insignificant in comparison to solve a problem effortlessly. You're hiding some tricks, aren't you? She asked, her tone shifting from playful boasting to genuine curiosity. Kale shrugged modestly. Maybe humans aren't always about looks. We like to find clever ways to solve problems. The crowd's attention shifted between the two of them, excitement buzzing in the air. It wasn't often that a human managed to impress in a contest of tales, especially one so clearly dominated by a skilled alien like Lyra. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about what Kale's tail could do if he really trained it. Lyra stepped down from her platform, her tail swishing in thought. I want to see more, she said, smiling. If you can move like that now, imagine what you could do with a little practice. Kale felt a mix of pride and amusement. Maybe I will. He couldn't resist the playful spark in her eyes, the challenge she posed without even intending to. Something about this encounter felt like the start of a unique friendship or maybe a rivalry that would push both of them to learn more. Over the next hour, Kale and Lyra moved among the market stalls, trying small games and demonstrations. Lyra would spin, lift, and flip objects with her tail, showing off her impressive control. Kale would quietly try similar maneuvers, finding creative ways to stabilize, retrieve, or balance things using his own tail. It wasn't as graceful, but it was clever. And he often managed to solve challenges in ways Lyra hadn't considered. The crowd began to cheer for both of them. Not for who had the longest or most flashy tail, but for the ingenuity each displayed. Children pointed and laughed in delight. Aliens whispered to one another in fascination. And even the merchants paused to watch the unexpected display at one point. Lyra challenged Kale to a simple race through a narrow obstacle path, tails allowed. She darted forward, her long tail swinging gracefully behind her. Kale followed, using his tail to balance on narrow beams, grip railings, said slide past obstacles in ways Lyra hadn't anticipated. He didn't win in speed, but he finished without losing balance once. Using clever tricks that drew applause, Lyra laughed, clearly impressed. I underestimated you, she admitted, brushing a strand of shimmering hair from her face. Your tail. It's small, but it works in ways I never expected. I thought it was just for balance. Kale smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't expected. Sometimes, it's not about size or showiness. It's about how you use what you have. The market buzzed with energy as the day wore on. Kale and Lyra continued their playful demonstrations, drawing a larger crowd and gaining the attention of station officials. It was clear to anyone watching that this meeting of tales was something special, not a contest of pride, but a meeting of minds, a celebration of cleverness and creativity as the sun-like artificial lights of Aurora Nexus dimmed into evening. Kale and Lyra finally paused, leaning against a railing overlooking the planet below. The view was breathtaking. Forests glowed softly under the station's orbit, rivers sparkled, and tiny creatures could be seen moving among the trees. I have to admit, Lyra said, her voice quieter now, you surprised me today. I thought humans couldn't do much with tails. She gave a playful nudge with her own tail, not gentle, but teasing. Kale laughed. Maybe that's why we like surprises. He looked out at the planet, feeling a sense of anticipation. Somehow he knew this was just the beginning of something bigger. A friendship, a rivalry, and perhaps adventures that would test not just skill, but creativity and cleverness. The stars outside twinkled like tiny diamonds scattered across velvet. And Kale couldn't help but feel that the universe was full of possibilities. Tails or no tails, humans had a way of surprising those who underestimated them. And he intended to prove it in ways that were clever, playful, unforgettable. As they walked back toward the bustling center of the station, Kale felt a quiet excitement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new games, perhaps new opportunities to show that even a small tail could make a big difference. Lyra chatted beside him, still confident but now clearly respectful. For the first time, Kale felt like he was meeting someone who understood that skill could come in many forms, that even the most unlikely abilities could shine when used wisely. The adventure had only just begun, and Kale knew he was ready for whatever the stars had in store. The next morning, Kale woke with a sense of excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. Aurora Nexus glowed softly outside the small observation window of his quarters, its corridors alive with beings from countless worlds. Today, he thought, would be different. Yesterday's playful encounter with Lyra had left him energized, eager to explore, and secretly determined to improve his skills. Kale stretched, feeling the small tail at the base of his spine twitch involuntarily. It was a reminder of the uniqueness. He carried a tool that could be used in ways most humans never imagined. He had spent many hours studying it, practicing movements in private, and experimenting with balance, precision, and coordination. Now he felt ready to put it to the test in front of someone who could truly appreciate it. Lyra, by mid-morning. The station's main plaza was alive with chatter, laughter, and the soft hum of hovering vendors. Kale navigated the crowd, careful not to bump into anyone, though the more he moved, the more his tail adjusted automatically, helping him balance on uneven surfaces and step smoothly across the platforms. He spotted Lyra near the edge of a small amphitheater, practicing graceful flips with her tail, while the station's younger visitors cheered. Lyra's tail moved like liquid silk, curling, twisting, and flipping objects with incredible precision. A small crate of floating orbs spun in the air, held perfectly in place by her tail as she spun around. Kale watched, impressed and slightly envious. He smiled and waved, and she spotted him immediately. "Good morning, human," she called, her voice carrying easily across the plaza. Her tail flicked in a playful gesture, almost as if inviting him to try something daring. "Good morning, Lyra," Kale replied, keeping his tone casual. He approached carefully, letting his tail move naturally behind him, practicing again. "Of course. You never stop learning, do you?" Lyra said with a laugh. "But I'm curious. Have you been practicing with that little tail of yours?" Kale shrugged, pretending to be modest. "A little, but nothing fancy. I just experiment with it." Lyra's eyes sparkled with interest. "Experimenting, huh? I like that. Show me something new." Kale felt a rush of anticipation. This wasn't just about showing off. It was about learning, testing limits, and seeing how far he could push what humans were capable of. He adjusted his stance, letting his tail move freely. It had grown more flexible with practice, reacting almost like an extra limb. It's helping him reach balance, stabilize in ways that seemed subtle, but effective. Lyra clapped her hands, encouraging him. "Don't be shy. I want to see what clever humans can do." Kale started slowly, performing simple movements, grabbing a floating crate, balancing on the edge of a narrow platform, and shifting his weight smoothly. Nothing flashy, nothing meant to draw attention, but each move required precision and awareness. His tail bent, curled, and extended to provide support, almost as if it were reading his intentions before he even made them. Lyra watched closely, a hint of surprise flickering across her face. Not bad at all," she murmured. "You're using it in ways I didn't expect." Kale tried something more daring. He moved toward a platform several meters high, narrow and unstable, and stepped onto it carefully. His tail wrapped around the support beams beneath him, adjusting tension as he shifted weight. The crowd nearby gasped softly, impressed by his balance. Lyra's tail twitched in amusement. "Clever," she said. "You're making your tail do what mine can do, but in your own way. I like that." The day continued with playful experimentation. Kale tried retrieving items from high shelves, balancing crates, and even guiding small rolling spheres with subtle tail movements. Each time Lyra watched, occasionally offering tips or challenging him to do something more difficult. "You need to think beyond just lifting or balancing," she said at one point. "Your tail can interact with the environment, not just objects. Try moving through a space where nothing is stable. Kale considered the challenge. He noticed a set of floating platforms nearby, hovering at different heights and angles. It was a perfect testing ground. He stepped onto the first platform, letting his tail adjust for balance. Slowly, carefully, he moved from one platform to the next. The tail twitched and curled instinctively, wrapping around edges, acting as a counterweight, and keeping him steady as he shifted his body in ways that would have caused most beings to fall. Lyra watched in awe, her usual teasing expression replaced with genuine admiration. "I didn't think a human tail could adapt like that," she admitted. "You're impressive." Kale grinned. "It's all about thinking creatively. Size and elegance aren't everything. Sometimes cleverness matters more." Their playful interaction drew the attention of station officials, who were organizing a friendly interspecies agility challenge later that day. The event involved a series of obstacle courses, problem-solving tasks, and creative demonstrations of skill. Observing Kale and Lyra, the officials decided it would be perfect to invite both of them to participate. When the announcement was made, a small crowd gathered around the plaza. Lyra's eyes lit up with excitement. "Looks like we'll have to put our tails to the test," she said, bouncing slightly on her toes. "Are you ready, human?" Kale nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, he felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was his chance to show that humans could excel in unexpected ways, to prove that ingenuity often mattered more than natural elegance. The first event was a balance course. Platforms floated at different heights, some tilting or spinning, requiring participants to move carefully and strategically. Lyra darted across the platforms with ease, her tail helping her maintain perfect posture and control. Kale followed, using his tail not just for balance, but as a tool to stabilize platforms and guide himself forward. The crowd gasped softly each time he made precise movement that seemed improbable for someone his size. Next came a problem-solving task. Participants had to retrieve objects from a maze-like area, using only their tails to manipulate tools, lift barriers, or navigate tight spaces. Lyra's tail moved with grace, flipping objects and clearing paths with flair. Kale's tail moved with precision, almost silently adjusting levers, balancing beams, and guiding objects to their intended spots. The crowd murmured in amazement, impressed by his creativity. Lyra glanced at him, curiosity and respect in her eyes. "You really think through every move," she said. "It's clever, more clever than I expected." Kale smiled quietly. "That's the point. Sometimes brains make up for what nature doesn't give you." The final challenge was a combination of balance, problem-solving, and creativity. Participants had to navigate a floating course filled with obstacles, retrieve items, and assemble a small structure using only their tails. Lyra darted ahead, spinning and twirling, handling each obstacle with practiced elegance. Kale followed, using his tail in ways no one expected, draping it around beams for extra support, nudging items into place, and finding shortcuts that minimized effort while maximizing precision. At one point, Kale's tail extended just enough to catch a small crate about to fall off a platform. With a subtle twist, he corrected its position and used it to stabilize the next platform he needed to cross. The crowd gasped in delight, some cheering, others whispering about how clever he was. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. She had expected a playful display, maybe a few clever tricks, but Kale's tail was doing things she hadn't imagined possible. "You're full of surprises," she said, laughing and shaking her head. "I never thought a human tail could be this versatile." Kale felt a rush of pride but kept moving forward, focused on completing the challenge. By the end, both Lyra and Kale had finished successfully, impressing not only the audience, but also the officials judging the event. The two stood together at the finish line, their tails twitching in satisfaction and exhaustion. "You did well," Lyra said, nudging him playfully with her tail. "I thought I was the only one who could make tails look amazing." Kale laughed. "Looks like humans have a few tricks up their sleeves." "Or tails," he replied. "Who knew small things could do so much?" The crowd cheered, clapping for both of them, celebrating creativity, ingenuity, and the playful spirit that had defined their friendly rivalry. Lyra smiled, clearly impressed and no longer just teasing. You've earned my respect, human. Cleverness counts more than flashiness, and you proved it. Kale grinned. Thanks. I have to admit, you make me want to keep learning more. Maybe one day we'll figure out even better ways to use our tails together. Lyra laughed. Challenge accepted. I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. As the sun-like lights of Aurora Nexus shifted toward evening, Kale and Lyra walked through the bustling plaza, their tails moving naturally behind them. They shared stories of their species' tail abilities, laughed at past mistakes, and planned ways to improve for the next challenge. The playful rivalry had turned into mutual respect, curiosity, and excitement for what lay ahead. Kale felt a quiet thrill in his chest. Today had shown him that even a small tail could make a big difference, that creativity mattered as much as elegance. That humans, in their own subtle ways, could surprise the universe. And with Lyra by his side, there was no telling what they could achieve together. The day ended with the station glowing softly against the backdrop of stars. Kale watched from the observation deck, feeling a sense of possibility. The next day, the station announced the main event, the Interstellar Agility Challenge. A competition designed to test creativity, balance, dexterity, and clever use of unique abilities. Participants from many species lined up, some with long tails, some with multiple arms, and others with wings or other adaptations. Kale felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. This would be the real test, not just a playful display, but a challenge that would show whether human ingenuity could truly shine among extraordinary species. Lyra was already at the starting area, her tail coiling and uncoiling in anticipation. She had practiced overnight, refining new tricks and movements, eager to impress the crowd and herself. When she saw Kale approaching, she waved enthusiastically. Ready to see who really surprises the galaxy today? She asked, her tone teasing but friendly. Kale smiled. I'm ready. Let's make this fun. He adjusted his jacket slightly, making sure his tail was free to move naturally. Though small, it had grown stronger and more precise with practice, and he had learned to rely on it instinctively. The first part of the challenge was the floating obstacle course. Platforms hovered at different heights, some spinning, others tilting or shifting when stepped on. Participants had to cross the course quickly while carrying small objects from one platform to another. Lyra launched ahead immediately, her long tail wrapping around support beams and objects to stabilize herself as she moved with fluid grace. The crowd cheered, impressed by her skill and elegance. Kale followed, concentrating on precision and clever use of his tail. He moved deliberately, letting it act as a counterweight when platforms tilted and as a stabilizer when crossing narrow paths. Unlike Lyra, who relied on natural elegance and length, Kale's tail worked in subtle, inventive ways. He nudged platforms with the tip, caught loose objects mid-fall, used small swings to generate momentum without losing balance. Spectators whispered among themselves. Look at that human, one said. He's so clever, even with that tiny tail. Lyra glanced back, surprised. Kale's movements were not flashy, but every motion was calculated and effective. He reached a particularly tricky section where a set of platforms shifted unpredictably. Without hesitation, Kale wrapped his tail around a support beam, pulled himself across, and nudged a tilted platform back into place. The crowd gasped, impressed. Lyra smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. I didn't expect that, she admitted. You're making your tail do things I wouldn't have thought possible. The next section was the puzzle challenge. Participants had to retrieve objects hidden within a maze-like structure and place them in correct slots using only their tails. Lyra darted forward, quickly locating objects and lifting them with elegant precision. Kale approached methodically. Analyzing the layout, he noticed that some objects were behind barriers too small for his arms, and some slots were tricky to reach. Using his tail, he slid objects along surfaces, nudged levers to open paths, and even balanced on narrow beams to place items perfectly. The other participants watched in awe. Kale's tail might have been small, but it was clever, reliable, surprisingly versatile. When he completed the puzzle, the audience erupted into applause. Lyra, who had finished just ahead of him, turned and grinned. "I have to admit, you did that better than I expected. Your tail has—" Style. Kale laughed. Style comes from thinking ahead, not just looking good. After a brief rest, the challenge entered the final stage, the creative use of tails segment. Participants had to complete a series of tasks requiring ingenuity, teamwork, and coordination. Kale and Lyra were now on the same team, each recognizing the benefit of working together. The first task involved transporting a delicate, glowing orb across a series of moving platforms. Lyra wrapped her tail around it, balancing it expertly while leaping from one platform to the next. Kale observed and then used his tail as a stabilizer, adjusting the orb's position slightly with precise nudges, keeping it steady when Lyra's leaps caused small shifts. Together, they completed the task flawlessly. The next task required assembling a structure from floating blocks, while suspended above a shallow pit of soft gel. Lyra moved quickly, stacking blocks with her long tail. Kale carefully nudged pieces into place from below, using his tail to adjust angles and balance pieces that were unstable. Their teamwork impressed the judges and the crowd. Finally, they faced the surprise challenge, where participants had to think creatively to retrieve an object placed in a high-spinning structure. Lyra leapt, her tail swinging gracefully, but the structure's spinning made it difficult. Kale assessed the situation quickly. Using his tail as a pivot, he swung to a nearby beam, nudged a part of the structure to slow its rotation, and then extended his tail to catch the object. The audience gasped as Kale made the move flawlessly. Lyra's eyes widened in amazement. "I can't believe it. You actually did it," she exclaimed. Kale smiled, panting slightly. "It's all about using what you have in clever ways." When the final scores were announced, the crowd cheered for Kale and Lyra's team. They had not only completed every challenge successfully, but they had also done so with creativity, cleverness, and teamwork. The judges praised Kale's ingenuity, noting that humans often surprised others with unexpected solutions, and Lyra's skill, elegance, and quick thinking. Lyra nudged Kale with her tail. "You really shocked me today. I thought my tail was unbeatable, but yours is clever in ways I never imagined." Kale laughed softly. "I guess humans have a few surprises hidden up their sleeves or tails." After the event, the plaza buzzed with excitement. Spectators talked about the teamwork, the clever maneuvers, and the unusual combination of elegance and ingenuity. Kale and Lyra were invited to give a small demonstration for children, showing how to use tails for problem-solving and balance. They laughed and guided the young participants, letting them experiment with small tools and safe exercises. Lyra whispered to Kale, "No, I never expected to respect a human tail this much." "Maybe you've taught me a lesson or two about cleverness," Kale grinned. "And you've reminded me that elegance has its own power. Together, we make a pretty good team." As evening fell, the lights of Aurora Nexus shimmered like tiny stars reflected on glass. Kale and Lyra walked along the observation deck, sharing stories of their past adventures and dreams for the future. Kale realized that the day had shown him more than just the competition. It had revealed the power of creativity. "Teamwork and thinking differently, you know?" Lyra said thoughtfully. "I've always been proud of my tail, but today I think I learned something important. Being clever can matter just as much as being graceful." Kale nodded, looking out at the glowing planet below. "Exactly. And sometimes the unexpected ones surprise the world the most." They paused to watch a small shuttle drift by, its lights reflecting on the observation deck's surface. The station hummed softly, alive with energy, possibilities, and adventure. Kale felt a sense of anticipation for the days ahead. With Lyra as a friend, an occasional rival, he knew that every challenge could become an opportunity to learn, innovate, and maybe even amaze the universe. As they returned to the plaza to celebrate with the other participants, Kale noticed the wide smiles of children and young aliens trying out small tail exercises. Their laughter echoed in the corridors, a reminder that ingenuity and creativity were infectious, inspiring others to experiment and learn. Kale felt proud, not just for winning or completing the challenges, but for showing that humans could make a mark in ways others didn't expect. Lyra nudged him again. her tail curling around his in a friendly gesture. You really did surprise me today. I guess boasting isn't everything. Cleverness matters more, Kale laughed. And sometimes it's the small things that make the biggest difference. The night ended with a quiet stroll through the station's gardens. The plants glowed softly, and bioluminescent creatures flitted among them. Kale and Lyra talked about plans for future exploration, playful competitions, and how they might combine their abilities for new challenges. The friendly rivalry that had begun as playful teasing had transformed into mutual respect, curiosity, and the excitement of shared adventures. As Kale gazed at the stars beyond the station, he felt a thrill in his chest. The universe was vast, full of unknown worlds and new experiences, and he knew that with creativity, teamwork, and a little cleverness, humans could continue to surprise even the most confident aliens. And with Lyra at his side, the possibilities seemed endless. The stars twinkled above. The station buzzed with life, and Kale's tail twitched involuntarily. A quiet reminder that he was ready for whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new games, and perhaps even greater surprises. And Kale was determined to meet them head-on, cleverness at the ready, and a small tail that could do far more than anyone expected. The day after the Interstellar Agility Challenge, Kale woke feeling unusually excited. He had not only surprised Lyra and the crowd, but also realized something important. Humans could truly stand out in ways no one expected. His tail, small as it was, had proven its cleverness. But today promised something different. A series of informal challenges designed to encourage creativity and teamwork among all species on Aurora Nexus. Kale walked through the station's corridors, the soft hum of machinery and chatter of alien voices creating a lively backdrop. Vendors were setting up colorful stalls, while floating platforms carried visitors to different parts of the plaza. Kale's tail twitched instinctively, helping him balance as he navigated the busy pathways. He spotted Lyra ahead, standing on a low platform and waving at him. "Kale," she called, her tone full of energy. "Ready for today's activities? I hear they're going to test more than just balance. Creativity counts too." "I'm ready," Kale replied, smiling. "I think yesterday taught me that being clever matters just as much as being fast or graceful." Lyra's tail curled in amusement. "Good. You might just be better than I thought. Let's see what you can do today." The first activity was a puzzle tower, a vertical structure made of translucent blocks. Participants had to move pieces from one side to another using only their tails. Some blocks were light, others heavier than they appeared, and a few shifted unpredictably when touched. Lyra launched forward immediately, her long tail wrapping around blocks and lifting them into place with grace. Kale approached the tower more carefully, observing the movement of each block and planning his approach. His tail moved with precise coordination, nudging pieces into place and stabilizing blocks that wobbled. "Wow," Lyra said quietly, impressed. "You're not just moving them, thinking about how they move and using your tail to control that. Clever." Kale smiled. "It's not about how flashy it looks. It's about solving the problem efficiently." By the time the puzzle tower was complete, both had earned applause from the watching crowd. Children pointed excitedly, whispering among themselves about how two completely different tails could work so well to achieve the same goal. The crowd wasn't just impressed by elegance. They were amazed by ingenuity. Next came the maze of mirrors, a twisting labyrinth where participants had to navigate through reflective surfaces, avoiding dead ends and retrieving small glowing orbs. Lyra darted ahead, her long tail helping her move quickly, flipping or pushing mirrors to redirect light beams that would otherwise block her path. Kale moved cautiously, but efficiently. His tail acted as a guide, touching surfaces ahead, nudging movable barriers, and keeping his balance on narrow paths. He noticed a pattern in the mirror's placement and used subtle tail movements to manipulate several at once, creating a clear path to the orbs. By the time he reached the last orb, Lyra had finished just moments before him, and they both handed their collected items to the judges. "Impressive," Lyra admitted, brushing a strand of shimmering hair from her face. I didn't think a human tail could work so strategically. You're really good at this, Kale laughed. Thanks. I guess humans have to think extra hard when nature doesn't give them flashy advantages. The crowd was delighted by the friendly teamwork between the two. Unlike the competitions where individual performance was praised, today was about creative thinking and collaboration. Many spectators began mimicking Kale's methods in small exercises, moving objects carefully with their tails or finding new ways to balance on narrow beams. After a short break, the station introduced the Floating Garden Challenge. Participants had to navigate a series of platforms decorated with delicate plants, some of which floated in midair and moved small objects from one plant to another without disturbing the environment. Lyra's tail moved elegantly, carefully adjusting floating leaves and flowers. Kale approached methodically, using his tail to stabilize platforms and gently manipulate the floating objects. At one point, a small plant drifted toward the edge of a platform. Without hesitation, Kale's tail extended just enough to catch it, guiding it safely back into place. The audience cheered softly, impressed by his subtle precision. Lyra's eyes widened. You're not just clever, you're gentle too. That's something my tail doesn't always do naturally. Kale shrugged modestly. Sometimes being subtle is more effective than being flashy. The day continued with light-hearted challenges that tested imagination and dexterity. One required participants to build intricate shapes using floating blocks and ribbons. Lyra's tail twirled ribbons gracefully, weaving them into patterns that delighted the crowd. Kale's tail worked strategically, holding blocks in place while weaving, balancing each element with careful precision. By the end, both creations were praised for creativity, and judges commented on how teamwork had enhanced their designs. Between challenges, Kale and Lyra exchanged stories about their species. Lyra described how her tail had been trained from a young age, practiced for agility, balance, and performance. Kale shared how human tails were mostly experimental, but could develop surprising abilities with practice, especially in balance, problem-solving, and small manipulations. They laughed over differences, shared insights, and challenged each other to think of new uses for their tails. At one point, Lyra suggested a playful exercise. Let's see who can carry the most items across a narrow bridge using only their tails, she said, eyes sparkling. No hands allowed. Kale accepted the challenge eagerly. The bridge was suspended several meters above a soft landing zone with small obstacles along the way. Lyra moved first, her tail curling elegantly to lift and stabilize several objects at once. Kale followed, using his tail in clever, inventive ways, stacking objects, using momentum to swing heavier items across gaps, and keeping them balanced without letting a single piece fall. When he reached the end, the crowd cheered loudly. Though Lyra had elegance, Kale's clever methods had carried more items safely. Lyra laughed, clearly impressed. Okay, I admit it, she said, nudging him playfully with her tail. You've surprised me again. That tail of yours? It's smarter than it looks, Kale grinned. Thanks, yours is still amazing. But I like finding ways to make my small tail work harder. By the end of the day, the plaza was buzzing with excitement. Spectators were talking about how Kale and Lyra had not only completed the challenges, but also inspired creativity in everyone watching. Children and young aliens tried mini challenges, using tails or other appendages in clever ways, learning from both participants. As the sun-like lights of Aurora Nexus began to dim into evening, Kale and Lyra stood side by side on a balcony overlooking the station's central garden. Floating lanterns glowed softly, illuminating the path below. The crowd's laughter echoed in the distance. A reminder of the day's success. I have to say, Lyra said thoughtfully, her tail curling gently. Today was more fun than I expected. It's not just about skill or elegance, it's about thinking, creating, and sometimes working together. I didn't realize how much humans could surprise me. Kale smiled. I've learned a lot too. You've shown me that grace and creativity go hand in hand, and that surprises can come from anywhere within a small tail. Lyra laughed softly. I think we make a good team. Maybe tomorrow we can find even more ways to challenge ourselves. Kale nodded. Definitely. There's always more to learn, more to discover. And the universe is big enough for a few surprises. They walked through the garden, their tails moving naturally behind them, sometimes brushing against floating plants or each other in playful gestures. They shared ideas for new games, discussed ways to combine their skills, and imagined creative challenges that could be held across the station or even on other planets by the time they returned to the plaza. The night had settled fully, and Aurora Nexus glowed against the backdrop of stars. Kale felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. Today had been more than a competition. It had been a lesson in creativity, ingenuity, and friendship. He had discovered that even small abilities could make a big difference. When used thoughtfully and cleverly, Lyra nudged him one last time with her tail. "You've really earned my respect, Kale. I might have boasted about my tail, but today I've learned that cleverness and creativity can surprise anyone. You proved that," Kyle laughed. "And you've reminded me that skill and elegance can inspire others too. We both have something to offer." As they stood together, looking out at the glowing lights of the station and the stars beyond, Kale felt a thrill of anticipation. Tomorrow promised new challenges, new games, and perhaps more surprises. And with Lyra as a friend and teammate, he knew that anything was possible. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, puzzles, and opportunities for clever solutions. Kale's tail twitched involuntarily, a reminder that even the smallest abilities could leave an impression. Lyra's tail swished gently beside his, signaling both playfulness and respect. Together, they had learned the joy of discovery, the power of ingenuity, and the excitement of shared adventures. As the station hummed softly with life, Kale realized that the most important lesson of the day was this: pride and elegance might draw attention, but creativity, cleverness, and cooperation created lasting impact. And humans, he thought with a smile, had a special way of surprising everyone who underestimated them. The next morning, Aurora Nexus buzzed with excitement more than ever. Word of Kale and Lyra's teamwork and clever performances had spread across the station, and now visitors from nearby planets and ships had arrived to see them in action. Today was the final event of the station's Creativity and Agility Week, a series of challenges meant to celebrate innovation, clever thinking, and cooperation. This was the perfect chance for Kale to show that human ingenuity could truly shine. Kale stepped into the main plaza, his tail twitching in anticipation. The plaza had been transformed into a vast obstacle course filled with platforms, floating orbs, delicate plants, and shifting blocks. Judges floated in the air on small platforms, ready to observe every move. Lyra was already there, her long tail swishing behind her as she performed subtle warm-up exercises. She spotted Kale and waved. "Good morning, human," she called. "Are you ready to surprise everyone one last time?" Kale grinned. "More than ready. Let's make it fun and clever." The first section of the course involved retrieving objects from unstable platforms. Some platforms floated at odd angles, while others tilted unpredictably. Lyra launched ahead immediately, her tail curling around each platform, lifting objects gracefully as she navigated the path. Kale followed, observing carefully. Instead of trying to match Lyra's flashy moves, he focused on efficiency, his tail extended and curled to stabilize platforms before stepping on them. When objects wobbled dangerously, he nudged them into place, using clever swings and leverage. A small audience gathered, whispering among themselves as Kale's movements proved surprisingly effective. The little tail that many might have overlooked was acting as a tool for precise control, balance, and problem-solving. Lyra watched in awe. "You're making it look effortless," she said. "I never thought a human tail could do so much." Kale smiled modestly. "Sometimes it's not about length or elegance. It's about using what you have smartly." The next part of the challenge was assembling a structure from floating blocks while moving across narrow beams. Lyra's tail spun gracefully, flipping blocks into place while keeping herself perfectly balanced. Kale, meanwhile, approached each beam with careful calculation. His tail wrapped around support beams, nudged blocks into position, and acted as a counterweight when he leaned forward. At one tricky spot, a block threatened to fall into the shallow pit below. Without hesitation, Kale extended his tail just enough to catch it, twist it upright, and use it to stabilize the next section of the structure. The crowd gasped, impressed by his precision and quick thinking. Even Lyra paused, amazed by the cleverness and ingenuity he had displayed. "You're full of surprises," she whispered, laughing. "I have to admit I didn't expect this." That's the fun of it. Humans like to find solutions others don't think of. Next came a creative teamwork challenge. Participants had to move a glowing orb through a twisting maze. Balancing it carefully while navigating obstacles and delivering it to a designated platform, Lyra grabbed the orb first, lifting it elegantly with her tail as she moved through the maze. Kale followed, his tail supporting her movements by stabilizing beams, nudging obstacles, and redirecting the orb gently when it shifted dangerously. Together, they worked seamlessly, balancing speed and precision. The orb remained steady in Lyra's control, while Kale's tail acted as a subtle guide and stabilizer. Spectators cheered, children clapped, and judges nodded in admiration. This wasn't just skill or elegance, it was clever problem-solving. Creativity and cooperation combined. As they reached the end of the maze, the orb safely in place, the crowd erupted into applause. Lyra turned to Kale, her eyes wide. "I can't believe how well we worked together. You've made your small tail into something extraordinary." Kale laughed softly. "Thanks, and you've reminded me that elegance and practice can do amazing things. Together, we make a pretty good team." The final section of the challenge was the surprise innovation test, designed to test creativity under pressure. Participants were presented with a set of tools, blocks, ropes, and floating platforms, then asked to invent a clever solution to a problem chosen randomly by the judges. Kale's problem was to move a delicate floating container from one platform to another, without touching it with his hands or letting it fall. Lyra had a similar task with a slightly different setup. Kale analyzed the container, the platforms, and the surroundings. His tail instinctively twitched, curling and extending to find solutions. He realized he could use a combination of balance, leverage, and gentle nudges to guide the container. Carefully, he stepped onto the first platform, letting his tail wrap around a support beam. He extended it to push a nearby object into position, creating a path for the container to move smoothly. The container floated along the improvised path, wobbling slightly but remaining stable. Kale adjusted his tail precisely at each moment, correcting the movement with subtle twists and gentle taps. The audience watched in silence, captivated by his clever approach. When the container finally reached the designated platform safely, a wave of applause erupted. Lyra's eyes sparkled in admiration. "That was incredible. You didn't just solve the problem, you made it look simple." Kale grinned. "Clever thinking can make even a small tail powerful." Lyra completed her task gracefully as well, lifting her container with elegant precision. When the judges compared results, they praised both participants not just for completing the tasks, but for creativity, ingenuity, and the way they had approached each challenge. Kale's subtlety and clever solutions had earned him special recognition, while Lyra's elegance and skill inspired everyone watching as the final scores were announced. Kale and Lyra's names were called together. They had not only succeeded individually, but also demonstrated the value of collaboration, creativity, and innovation. The crowd cheered loudly, some clapping, others whistling, and children waved excitedly. The judges presented them with small trophies, a glowing orb for Kale, symbolizing cleverness, and a crystal pendant for Lyra, symbolizing skill and elegance. Kale held the glowing orb in his hands, feeling a quiet sense of pride. Not because he had won a prize, but because he had shown that humans, often underestimated, could shine through ingenuity and clever thinking. Lyra nudged him playfully with her tail. "I have to admit," she said, smiling, "you really surprised me." "Your tail might be small, but it's brilliant," Kale laughed. "Thanks, and your tail is still amazing. I guess there's something special about combining cleverness and elegance." After the awards, the plaza remained lively. Spectators tried mini challenges using small tools or their own tails in clever ways. Children laughed and experimented, inspired by Kale and Lyra's teamwork. The atmosphere was joyful, playful, and full of curiosity. Lyra and Kale found a quiet balcony overlooking the central garden. Floating lanterns glowed softly, casting reflections on the plants below. The station's soft hum created a soothing background, Lyra said thoughtfully. I used to think tales were mostly for show or balance. Today, I learned they can be tools for thinking, solving problems, and even inspiring others. Kale nodded. Exactly. And humans may not have flashy tales, but cleverness and creativity can make even a small tale powerful. Sometimes surprises come from unexpected places. They watched as small groups of children practiced balancing, lifting objects, and solving mini puzzles with their tails. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and Kale felt a sense of satisfaction. He had not only proven himself, but also encouraged others to explore, experiment, and discover their own cleverness. Lyra's tail swished beside him. I think we make a good team. Maybe someday we'll explore other planets together, solving challenges and surprising others along the way. Kale smiled. I like that. The universe is full of mysteries, puzzles, and surprises. And who knows? Maybe humans will continue to astonish even the most confident aliens. The stars beyond Aurora Nexus twinkled brightly, reflected in the station's glass surfaces. Kale felt a rush of anticipation. There were countless worlds, countless challenges, and endless opportunities to test ingenuity and creativity. His tail twitched instinctively, a quiet reminder of the abilities he carried on, the clever solutions he could devise when needed. Lyra nudged him again, her tail brushing his lightly in a friendly gesture. You've really earned my respect, Kale. I might have boasted about my tail, but today, you've shown that cleverness and creativity can be just as powerful. Kale laughed. And you've reminded me that elegance in practice can inspire everyone. Together, we make a pretty impressive team. As they walked back into the bustling plaza, the station alive with light and laughter, Kale realized that the day had not only been a competition, it had been a celebration. It had shown the power of ingenuity, teamwork, and playful curiosity. Humans, he thought with a smile, had a special way of surprising those who underestimated them. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she looked at him. Ready for the next adventure? She asked. Kale nodded, feeling excitement ripple through him. Always. The universe is big, and there are plenty of surprises waiting for us. Together, they moved through the plaza, their tails swishing in harmony. Ready for whatever challenges, games, and mysteries the stars might hold? And in that moment, Kale knew that even a small tail, guided by cleverness, determination, and creativity,